Good morning. It's the third Sunday after Easter. Our text this morning is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, Gospel of Luke, chapter 24. I'm going to be reading from the NASB this morning. I know some of you read from the NIV and others from the New King James. This morning I felt like the text set up just a little bit more in the NASB. Well, it's Mission Sunday at Camac. So remember, if you support missions on the fourth Sunday of the month, please go ahead and send that in to the office. And also remember to send your tithes and your offerings through the mail to the church office. Thanks so much. A lot of people have been asking me about what do we do with, if we have plenty of resources, what do we do with this stimulus check that we're getting for $1,200 or so? Well, I think there are three things that you should consider if you're taken care of, and if you have what you need, and you want to, or you feel led to give that away. First is, for immediate need, I would give to individuals. You don't have to do it yourself. You can have someone else do it for you, so that, like Jesus says, your right hand doesn't know what your left hand is doing. If it's awkward to give money, and oftentimes it is, then have somebody else do it for you anonymously. But immediate need is very often helped through just giving to individuals. The early church functioned that way. There were no institutions or organizations or anything like that. It was person to person. The second thing I would consider is, if you do want to give to an organization, think about the ones that you want to be here after there's a vaccine, or after whatever the economic downturn, as things maybe start to go back to work, and we don't know when that would be. Could be another year. But the organizations that you want to survive, and the organizations that you want to remain after, whenever that might be, this is over, consider giving to those. And then also, third, similar to the second one, if there are organizations that you want to personally be involved in, this is a good time to get to know folks in that nonprofit, and a good time to support. So give personally to people that are in need. Find organizations that you want to be around after the coronavirus is over. And then are there places, organizations, missions that you want to be involved in? This is a perfect time to sign up. So those three things, if you want to give your stimulus check away. My apple trees are just starting to show a little bit of blossom. Cherry trees the same way. Peach trees, they bloomed very early, and we lost quite a few blossoms from the freeze. I was just out there checking on them earlier, and some of the blossoms are gone. But if we have a good fruit this year, I'm excited to share that with you when it comes in season. Are you at Luke chapter 24? We're going to start in verse 13. So go ahead and turn there. Some of you have been on an Emmaus walk, or something similar. It's where you spend a weekend at a retreat center, and you go through disciplines, and you go through practices, and people are there to support you. But it is really a deep dive into your heart, and recognizing that the Lord and others love you. Now, folks familiar with the Emmaus Walk, they want it to be a surprise, the weekend to be a surprise, so we won't share much more. But it comes from the passage that we're looking at today, 24:13, beginning there. The road to Emmaus. So go ahead and I'll read and you follow along. And behold, 2 of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And they said to him, "What are these words that you are exchanging?" He said to them, "What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking?" And they stood still, looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem unaware of these things which have happened here in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word, and in sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the 3rd day since these things happened. But also some women among us amazed us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as the women also had said. But him they did not see." And Jesus, he said to them, "O foolish men and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in the Scriptures. Let's pause there for a moment. In these days, this Easter weekend for Jesus' disciples and those around Palestine, Jesus is always like appearing and then disappearing, showing up and then leaving. And we see him. He disappeared from the tomb. We see him tell Mary, "Don't cling on to me. Go tell what's happened." We see him disappeared later in this passage from the people that he's with on the road to Emmaus. And we see him disappear into heaven at the end of this chapter, and then also when Luke begins his 2nd book in Acts. He keeps disappearing, or he keeps exiting. His interactions are incredibly powerful, but then he's gone. He's not here. Jesus is disappearing because he's leaving us to do the work which he began. He's leaving us to spread the message, to tell the message, to give our witness. All of this account here is different people giving their witness. And we'll get to that in just a moment. They are walking later in the day outside of Jerusalem, so they're walking west out of Jerusalem toward a town called Emmaus, which we know it's 7 miles away, but it's not really, it's not able to be located today. It's not exactly known where it is, just 7 miles west of Jerusalem. And so in the evening, you would be walking into the setting sun, so that the sun is facing them in their eyes. And yet that doesn't seem to be the reason why they can't see that it's Jesus. There's something keeping them. It's like the big unmentioned person. God is keeping them from seeing exactly who Jesus is, or they are keeping themselves from seeing exactly who Jesus is because they can't quite wrap their minds around it. And that's okay. It's okay if you can't quite wrap your mind around the resurrection. What Jesus will do is he will present himself to you in such a way, or in such a special way, that your eyes will then be opened. And this is a pattern that is not just in the Bible, but story after story, person after person, not only testimonies and witnesses from history, but also in our churches and today, and people in our lives. We are continually having experiences where our eyes just didn't quite see. We just couldn't quite make our mind wrap around it. And then all of a sudden we do see, and we are renewed. We are energized. We go from situation that is confusing and disorienting, and we can't see our way out of it. And then the Lord does something. He presents himself to us, and now we see with new vigor, with new energy, with new eyes. And we are motivated to tell people, others, what we have experienced. So they're walking to Emmaus. It's in the evening, and Jesus comes up, and surely he knows, but he, in a good-natured way, he's asking them questions. He's probing them to see what's going on, to get them to say it out loud. It's the third day, and we were hoping. And now we're disappointed. He wants to get them to say it out loud. I know in my own life, I often feel, in certain situations that are difficult, or relationships that are having trouble, a big hurdle is to get it from my insides, whether it's my heart or my mind, and to get it into words. Once I can get it into words, then I can begin the process of understanding what's going on. And Jesus is doing something similar with them. We were hoping, and now we're disappointed. It's interesting that Jesus rose from the dead, and even on that day, that Sunday, Easter Sunday, people are still disappointed. I know that we celebrate Easter with a lot of pomp and circumstance, and lively celebration, but even this first Easter, it is not that way. People still don't understand. And isn't it good that the Lord is continually working whether we understand it or not? And he's working on our behalf to open our eyes. So Jesus talks with them as they're walking. I love the image of walking with the Lord on the path of life. Events happened. Religious events, political events, hopes, dreams, hopes dashed. And all of these things are discussed on the walk home after the Passover feast. And so Jesus, beginning with the first 5 books and going through the Bible, he is explaining to them where he is in those pages. I know you've heard it from me before that Jesus is on every page of the Old Testament. Once you have the eyes to see with the Christ lens, once we understand the nature of Jesus and Christ, and we go back and read the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, we see that he's alluded to on every page. You just flip. Oh, this is my goodness. Is this a story about Joseph? Nope, it's about Jesus. Is this a story about Abraham? Nope, it's about Jesus. This story, over and over again. Are these sacrifices? Are these about sacrifice? Nope, it's about Jesus. Is the way the altar's set up about cultic religious practice? Nope, it's about Jesus, right? We just continue to go through page after page. And the Lord is on every page. And that's what he was showing them as they were walking. And they didn't get the suffering piece. And he began to show them that the Christ must suffer, that the way of life is suffering. We don't get to redemption without suffering. So in verse 28, and as they approached the village where they were going, Jesus acted as though he were going further. But they urged him, saying, "Stay with us, for it is getting toward evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it, and breaking it, he began giving it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was explaining the scriptures to us?" And they got up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them, saying, "The Lord has really risen and has appeared to Simon." And they began to relate their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. So they get to the village of Emmaus, and Jesus says he's going to continue walking. "Goodbye, fellas." And they say, "No, it's too late for you to continue to stay on the road. Come stay with us." This is very, still in the Eastern world, hospitality like this is practiced, where you take in guests to your home, whether you really know them or not, and then they become sort of your charge to feed and give drink and help to rest, sleep, and even protect. And so they offer that to him, because the road at night, you might encounter a robber or something like that. So they say, "It's too late, you stay with us." And so he does. And it is not until he breaks the bread that they understand what he's talking about, or they understand who he is. And as soon as their eyes were opened, again, it's like their eyes opened, they themselves opened their eyes, the Lord opened their eyes, and then he was gone. And immediately, in the night now, they go back onto the road, which they had previously considered dangerous, in order to go back to Jerusalem, 7 more miles walking, and meet with the disciples there, and to share their experiences that the Lord has truly risen. This passage about "were not our hearts warmed while he was speaking to us," this is one of the foundational or traditional passages for Wesleyanism or Methodism, that John Wesley was hearing a passage from the book of Romans in a sermon, and all of a sudden he realized, like his eyes were opened, that it's not about works, and it's not about striving and achieving to please God, but rather it's about believing or faith. And the believing or the faith or the trusting is what pleases God. And salvation is credited to our account based upon God's work in Christ, and based upon our believing or our faithing or our trust. And his whole life he had spent trying to achieve and do and be better and try harder. And when he heard that particular message and that particular passage from Paul in the book of Romans, his heart was warmed in this same sense. Have you had that feeling before, where And again, not every feeling we have can be attributed to the Lord. But when there's a moment of clarity, that moment of clarity often is accompanied by emotion, our hearts being warmed. And they recognized that as Jesus was speaking, they were experiencing that. I want to turn slightly a different direction and apply this to a topic from today. If you notice that what happened was Jesus visited them, Jesus explained himself to them, then they invited Jesus in, and when he was breaking the bread with them, their eyes were opened and they saw him, and then he left them. Then they went back out on the dangerous road to go give their testimony. And their testimony is simply that the Lord appeared to us, or the Lord made himself known to us, the Lord showed himself to us, that he is risen from the dead, and that our lives are now going in a different direction. We are not at home anymore. Peter is not fishing anymore. The other Matthew is not tax collecting anymore. When the Lord gets a hold of us, or the Lord gets our eyes opened, we can't go back home. The process of conversion leaves us without a home. And I know that that might sound harsh or troubling or difficult, but the testimony or the witness of the Scripture is that we are a stranger in this land. We are a foreigner here. We no longer have a home because our home is now with the Lord. Our home is now in the place that he's preparing. And so when I say that we don't have a home, I don't mean that this isn't our home, that we don't take care of the place we live, that we don't invest in relationships and building things here. Of course we do. But our ultimate sense of security and place is in the new heaven and the new earth, when everything here gets remade or changed. Or in the same way that we see these guys on the road and they go through this process, the world will change like that, and the eyes will be opened, and everything will be well, and everything will be good. And so while this is a foretaste of the future, and the future with the Lord is our ultimate home, that doesn't mean we don't take care of the world now or our home now, but rather it means that our allegiance isn't to this home. Our allegiance isn't to the politics and the economics of today. Our allegiance isn't to any particular nation or ethnic group. Our allegiance isn't to any particular philosophy or ideology. Our allegiance, our home, is to Jesus Christ, the person himself. And our testimony is not about economics, and our testimony is not about politics, meaning that our witness is not trying to convert or show people our particular ideology or our particular philosophy on this or on that. If you're doing that, you're not witnessing Jesus. It doesn't mean that we don't have beliefs or ideas, or we try theories, or we try practice in different ways. Of course we do. What I'm saying is that our witness to others is Jesus himself. Nothing else attached to it. No other news to it. Just the good news. that there was a man who was dead, that thousands of years of scriptures had pointed to. That man is now alive, and he is working in my life even though I don't see him. The eyes of my heart see him. And that's our witness. And I want to be very careful myself to not add anything to my witness. It's just Jesus. And I want to encourage you to be very cautious that when we are talking to others about what God has done in our lives, that we're just sharing Jesus with them. We're not adding any other philosophy or ideology or politic or economic theory to it. But rather, we practice what the Lord is. And that's neighborliness. Our Christian witness is being a neighbor. Our Christian testimony is being a neighbor. All we have to do is, all that is needed for us to do is just to describe what the Lord's done in our lives. And that's it. And as we describe what the Lord has done in our lives, it's possible that other people are on the road and they're headed home and they invite us in, and we break bread together, and we're not pushy, and we're not forceful, and we're not overbearing, we're not critical, we're not judgmental, but rather we're just on the road together. We're talking about our lives. We break bread together. And maybe others begin to see that the end of life is not death. That the last word on our lives is not death. But rather we follow Jesus into death, and we follow Jesus into resurrection and into new life. And that's the good news. There isn't anything more to it, and we're not responsible for anything more. The Lord is the one who works in people's lives. And that's our witness. That's the gentle warming of our hearts. All right. I hope you're well. Please continue to email me or call or text. I've really enjoyed speaking with many of you this past week. I hope the weather gets nice and warm so we can sit on our porches and get some sunshine. God bless you, and I pray that your home is experiencing peace in every way. All right, see you later.